Hey everybody, it is Richard Harris and Scott Leese. We are here. I think we're on episode 9 of the Surf Sales podcast. We're super excited about this. We have with us today Carolyn Betts Fleming from Betts Recruiting. Obviously started when under her maiden name before she met her husband. And we're really excited. Scott and I've known Carolyn for several years now. I remember meeting Carolyn when I was long before I was ever a consultant, and just sort of getting to know her, and always found her insight and her energy super infectious. So Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here with you guys.
Yeah,
good to see you again, Carolyn.
And I really want to thank you, by the way. You guys did an amazing job on that training in Texas, and thank you for dropping your knowledge on our team members. The feedback was phenomenal. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thanks for that. It was awesome to be able to use the office there.
Yeah, we didn't ask Carolyn to say that. So thank you, Carolyn. We appreciate it. It's not a plug and play podcast, but so Carolyn, I think a fun place to start often is sort of the origin, right? Like going way back before you created Betts Recruiting. Like, what was your last job before Betts? And then what made you go, wait a minute, I can do this better?
Yeah, well, I'll go real fast a little bit before that, because it'll show how old I really am. My first job out of college was selling yellow page ads in the book, like when they had the actual book. So that was a hardcore hustle sales job, learned a ton. And from there I fell into recruitment, and I worked at another boutique for about 4 years. And then I took my media-ish experience and recruiting, and I went to careerbuilder.com, and I did enterprise sales there for a couple years. And great company, awesome, much larger company than I'd been with in the past. Had an opportunity to sell, into large organizations, complex sales cycle, multiple decision makers. And, but at the end of the day, I just really missed recruiting and building those solid relationships on both the talent side and with the companies. So when I did some soul searching, actually this is kind of funny, 10 years ago on January 1st was my first full-time day running Betts Recruiting. So it's been a really fun, long, interesting ride. And so
what was, I'm gonna ask, do you remember what day one was like? January 1st? Like, what were you like building a logo? Were you deciding on a name? Were you like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what was do you remember?
Well, I think anyone that starts their own company, when you're working for a larger organization, you tend to get your ducks in a row a little bit before, go time, full time. So right. I had the logo, I had the website, I had all that stuff, but I made a huge mistake. And because my boss knew, that was my last day. I'd given my notice long before. But I decided that day on New Year's to but you used to be able to take all your contacts from LinkedIn and send a mass message. So I did that. But he hadn't told all the people at Career Builder yet that I was leaving. And so all these executives and literally everyone I was connected to on LinkedIn gets this message about me starting Betts Recruiting. And anyway, I got my hand slapped there, but was really no longer in it.
Was your what were they going to do? You were leaving.
I know, but you don't want to burn any bridges, right? And I just, you don't know what you don't know.
This actually is a great segue, right? Because Scott and I talk about this a lot, and I think we even talked about it in Austin, is who owns your LinkedIn, right? That's Carolyn's LinkedIn. Those are your contacts. They're not your company, right? Yeah. What do you got, just out of curiosity, as we talk to whether you're on the recruitment side, a hiring manager, or you're a rep, or you're a manager looking for a new gig, how do you guys coach people on leveraging LinkedIn in that job moment? And it could be, there's a couple answers. It could be that, hey, before you start the actual thing, go update LinkedIn this way, make sure these notifications, whatever. How do you guys coach people on that?
Yeah, I think, and one of the things that, the topics that you guys have brought up are is the resume dead? And I don't think it is. But the first thing that people look at when they're considering you as a candidate is generally LinkedIn, right? They look at your picture and how you present your experience, try and they write their own story about what it is that your background looks like, right? They generally see, okay, did you go to college? If so, where? When did you graduate? And then, what information can I deduce from that? What was your first job? How long did you stay there? Where did you, and they really write their own story of what your career path was. And so I think the more information you can have on there, the better. And, and there's also this debate that goes on in the world out there of, as a salesperson, do you put your sales performance on your LinkedIn?
And how do you advise people? Do you tell them to do that? Yes or no?
I think you want to be pretty, because when you're in sales, your customers are looking at this too, right? And I see these things where it's like, I crush sales, blah, blah, blah. And that's not the consultative sales person that a lot of customers are looking to do business with. So my recommendation is
there's a tactful way, right?
Exactly. So I think tactfully putting your sales performance on there, top performer, President's Club. I don't think we need a quarter by quarter, play by play. You can save that for your resume or for, other recruitment oriented platforms where you can, really, that it's not customer facing, because LinkedIn is everything to everybody, right? You have your customers, you have your prospects, you have your clients, you have your employer, and you have, potential employers out there, and, probably many other categories. So you want to make it appealing to everybody in all those different senses.
So let me challenge you then, because I am somebody who believes that the resume is dead.
Okay.
I do not remember the last time I gave somebody a resume, and the last time somebody asked me for a resume, I said, yeah, go to my LinkedIn profile and download the PDF if you want my resume. So what advantages does a resume hold that I'm not thinking about anymore? You're saying LinkedIn is everything, but the resume is not dead. So what's the use case for a resume?
Okay, and just so to set the tone here, like obviously you are far further along in your career as a VP of sales, now running your own business, your reputation.
Fair enough.
Okay, so but when you're an individual contributing salesperson or even a mid-level manager, it's really used for on the interview. When you walk in and it shows that you're prepared. It shows that you've thought it out. It has all your stats, all the data, all the information, the logos, a lot of stuff that you can't include on LinkedIn or that your employer might not want you to, or that you want to be a little bit more, presenting yourself to all the different use cases of how you present yourself on LinkedIn. So the resume, having a printed resume shows all that great stuff.
So so you could say then it's more for the in-person part of the process.
100%. And not
okay. I agree. I agree with that. I personally, as I've interviewed people over the last few years, don't really have an expectation that people come in. But I will say that the people who come in and have one and kind of say, hey, here's my resume if you want it, I like that gesture. Even if I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. I just reviewed your LinkedIn profile for 5 minutes. Like, it's all good. I like the gesture though. So I can get behind that.
Cool.
I'll push it a little differently too, is that I do think you should have quarter by quarter performance. I do think you should have on your LinkedIn profile 102% Q3 2019. 101% Q2 2019.
Okay, but Richard, that's more tactful than being like, my sales number was 304,000 and I closed these particular accounts, which I've seen on people's LinkedIn profiles before.
I do tell people to name, particularly if you're going after enterprise, right? If you are going after enterprise, I believe you can put in tactfully, as you said, here are the numbers for the quarter, clients included. And I want them to be able to come to me and go, because to Carolyn's point, they write their own story. So I need to control that narrative a little bit more by saying, oh, I closed this client, right? Not all of them.
Would you try to control that narrative like while you're at your current role? I could see it like, okay, I've decided to move on. Now I'm going to add, Nike and AMX and massive companies.
Ask Carolyn.
So while you're there, solve the debate for us, Carolyn.
Yeah.
I think as a recruiter, like if somebody has all that on their LinkedIn, you're like, okay, this person's solid, right? And you're definitely going to reach out to them. But if they're an enterprise salesperson, an XYZ company that's a fit for your client, you're going to reach out to them regardless, right? And so it's up to personal preference of how much information you want to share, right? Like, I used to, right? You know, as somebody who's a top performer, like you want to, and I have logos back from my career builder days on my LinkedIn. So personally, but other people want to keep it a little bit more private, and that's fine too. I mean, I think you look like a stronger candidate if you have that stuff on there.
Wow. So Carolyn, so let's say, so we talked a little bit about, you know, LinkedIn and the resume, right? And I do like Scott's point of like, hey, it's a gesture, right? It's showing a certain level of respect for that person. What are the mistakes you see people doing or having, not on their resume or anything, but maybe just going into a first interview? What are mistakes we see people make, and we can give them advice? Don't do this anymore.
There's a lot, but I think.
Well, how about more specifically mistakes top people make, not junior level people and basic dumb errors, but what about mistakes that people, you know, shouldn't be making that are quite good, right?
Well, and because they're good, they might not need the new job. They might be treating it more as like a informational situation, and they're just too casual. They don't prepare. They haven't done the research. They might not have even, and it happens all, and you know, it's interesting because as part of our process at Betts with our services clients, like our clients expect that we make sure that people are prepared. And that's also another debate of like how much do we prepare them versus not prepare them. And constantly I hear, you know, things happen and these experienced enterprise salespeople go in for interviews and they just blow it. And, you know, we're always like, well, you know, were they prepared? Like, did you make sure? And they're like, well, they're so senior. I just assumed that they would know all this stuff. And sometimes they just don't, or they do know it, but they just cut corners because they think there's, you know, they understand that their experience is valued on the market and that they can kind of approach it in a little bit less of a professional way than they would a sales call or anything else in business.
Let me change the topic on you a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about the differences in managing a pipeline as individual contributor at Yellow Pages and Career Builder versus managing the pipeline, you know, when you were first building your business, and managing the pipeline now in recruiting versus like account selling, or maybe it's the same thing to you. I'm curious about that, kind of the differences there and the evolution of that.
So it's interesting, right? Because we basically have a marketplace business. And so, you know, we have our services and then we have the platform that I told you guys about. But so it's really interesting because there's two sides to it where, you know, at Career Builder, once the client, you know, once whatever company was I was selling into decided that they wanted to purchase Career Builder, that was it. We signed the agreement and then it moved on to a CSM. In recruiting, it's a lot longer of a process, right? Because first you have to identify the company. They either come to us or we figure out that they're doing a lot of hiring and would be a good fit within the market that we work in. And then like once they sign, that's when the real work begins, because then we have to go hunt and pitch all the candidates, etc. So, you know, we have a pretty complex way that we track things. And we actually at Betts have different people that bring on the companies and then different people that find the candidates and manage the relationships after the fact, because it is kind of a different sale. So, but for us, like, so that the BD part of the sales is tracked pretty basically. And there's no, well, you know, there's an engagement fee, but the real economics are more on the back end of once we get the talent on board. And then, you know, with the platform, it's very much like the Career Builder model where you pay for access and that sales model. Now on the back end, we do have the CSM model to make sure that, you know, the client's happy and interviewing, et cetera. So it's a lot of different moving parts, and it's a lot more complex than a typical SaaS sale.
And what about at the beginning as you were growing the business, right? So I'm going to assume, you know, you're on your own January 1st, you know, 10 years ago, you're hustling to get all these accounts, and then you're, you know, trying to fulfill these accounts. What are some of the ways that you manage to manage that pipeline, and we're able to keep growing and keep building your pipeline and growing and expanding your business. I ask this as somebody who's, re-emerging as an individual contributor, right? Because I've gone into business for myself now 3 months ago, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have to keep building my own pipeline now. I don't have a whole team, doing it for me. So I'm selfishly asking this question, I guess, for everybody else out there who has the same kind of challenge. How did you do that?
Yeah. So that's the reason why Betts Recruiting is not a one-person shop anymore, right? We have well over 100 people between our 5 offices, because it's a lot of work. And so you always have to find in recruiting the customers first, right? Who's hiring, get them to sign, but you want to have enough customers as well that, especially back then we were just contingency. And so, if somebody changed their mind, or hiring plans changed, or they went internal, whatever it was, you want to make sure that you can send these candidates multiple places. So it is it's running a marketplace business where the pendulum always swings, and it's never a perfect match, right? You either have too many clients that really want all the candidates, and clients always want more and more candidates, or not enough companies, and then you have a lot of candidates that are really strong, and you want to make sure that you find the companies. So, but in the early days, it's all about getting the logos, the companies on board, because when you have good clients and cool companies that are doing awesome things with great leaders, then the rest falls into place.
Scott, take notes on that. You know what you need to do now. Can you translate that?
I'm gonna re-listen to this episode like 50 times.
Exactly.
And I haven't mentioned this earlier. I'm going to be in Austin next week. If you want to get lunch or something, we can go deeper on some of
Done.
What are some of the myths about recruiters that need to be dispelled, right? So I'm a huge fan of recruiters. Like Scott and I are both like, oh, if you're ever looking for a new job, like absolutely go get a recruiter. Let them do a lot of heavy lifting for you, right? They'll give you some coaching. They'll give you some feedback. They'll tell you what to update on your resume, your LinkedIn profile. They'll teach you about who the company is. But what are some of the myths that y'all run into, or that we could help dispel for people who may be thinking about recruiters?
Okay, and are we talking about on the company side or on the talent side?
Why not do both?
Okay.
Sure.
Well, I think the company side, it depends on the size of the company. Most hiring people, like, VPs of sales, sales managers, et cetera, love using recruiters, right? And especially in sales, because they understand that the economics are aligned well to have somebody go execute for them. Also, the specialization. However, as companies get bigger and they bring in in-house recruiters, there's sometimes a conflict between internal and external recruiters, who does what, and so the myth there is, I think that things just have to be set up a lot more cleanly in the beginning of who runs in what lane and what we're doing, what you're doing, et cetera. So there's not conflict there. And I'm trying to think if there's any real myth, but as these companies get and I do think there's a myth that goes around that, I hear from sales leaders that, internal recruiters aren't as good as agency recruiters. And it's, internal recruiters are awesome, and they definitely serve a place in an organization. What I see happen very frequently is it's like this, injection. Oh, hey, we hired an internal recruiter. All of our dreams are, coming true. This person's going to get all these hires. We're going to save so much money on all these different things. And those people just aren't really set up for success in what it is that they're looking to accomplish, right? They'll have like 100 open recs and 2 people, and it just doesn't really work that way. There's a lot of work that goes into it on the back end.
Yeah, the challenge I see on the internal recruiter is that they're often then inundated from marketing, engineering, and sales, and they can help manage a process, but they can't become experts at what's a good engineer, what's a good salesperson, right? Until they've done it enough times, right? Unbeknownst, people are probably going, oh, Richard and Scott probably hired Carolyn once at some point. Well, I'll be honest with you, I know Scott. Scott has never used a recruiter, but that's because Scott's got a degree in psych. He's got a degree in psychology and human learning.
I don't think that's the reason why.
So, but I know Carolyn's been trying to get Scott to use them, and he's been at organizations big enough. But you know,
Yeah, actually, Scott, after you left Qualia, they signed us.
there you go.
We've been doing so much business with them lately.
That is Carolyn's version of "fuck you" to Scott right there. Well done. Well done.
Like there's certain levels of ability to execute on sales hiring. And Scott, like you're the top 1% of leaders out there that really understood of building an employment brand for yourself, what coming to work for me is, getting the referral. Like you did a really, really great job. And it's just, some people are better at it than others. And other people focus their energy elsewhere, right? They might, and yours is really big on team. Other people are more external with helping with deals or whatever. But I think in an SMB type sales environment, what you were, with the transactional type of model, it's all about building the right team and people that are willing to grind for you.
I just got our headline to get people to download this. Hear how Carolyn told Scott F you, right?
Yeah. She pays me back after a decade of avoidance. Okay.
So,
what about? I have a myth. Maybe it's a myth. I'm curious what you think. And hopefully it's not too controversial a statement, but it seems to me that it's definitely not. It's definitely true that there is a gap between women and men in sales, right? That gap seems to disappear almost on the recruiting side. It feels like there are significantly more women in sales on the recruiting side of things. Do you agree? Is that an accurate assumption on my part?
And especially, right, when you look at our company, and I've been working really hard to try and have a more 50-50 or at least 60-40 organization, because right now we're 80% women and 20% men. And what I think happens is it's really, motivated women want to work for other women, right? You see women in leadership, women moving up in their careers, women making lots of money. And that's attractive, right? And it's like, okay, well, if they have all these other women that are really successful, then I have a good chance of being successful. So I attribute it to that, right? As a female founder, it's going to be an attractive opportunity for other women. And so I think when, you look at building everyone, we want more women. Like we have some clients that say, only send us female candidates because we're really looking to, balance our team. We have too many men right now. And, so you have to really and a lot of these earlier stage companies have a massive advantage of building a diverse team because they don't already have a team, right? Once your team's not diverse, it's harder because, everyone looks at what it is and isn't sure if they're going to feel included or welcome. So I guess it's a long answer to a simple question, but it's a hot topic right now for sure.
What do you think, what attracts women, and I'll go a step further and tell me if I'm wrong, is that I often see more females and female leadership in the HR role in general, as well as in the recruiting role. And is it just because that's how it's been for so long, kind of almost like, well, teachers often are predominantly women, so women gravitate to that because there's like, is it, and I hate to be, I'm not trying to overly, I don't want to be inappropriate around it, but it's, that's how I see it. And maybe I'm just blind because I am a guy. I don't know. Like,
it's a hot topic for sure. And, I think it comes down to, nature versus nurture. What types of jobs do women really enjoy, right? And I think also how you were raised. And, some people were, I still remember when I was in high school, I wanted to take Spanish. I'm from California. I grew up in the Bay Area. And my mom said, no, boys take Spanish, girls take French, It's like, are you kidding me? Wow. This is like something real that happened. And, obviously my parents are lovely people and it was no way, meant to be like that. But right. I think it has to do with, and I think now, I love John Barrow's book about, I want to be in sales when I grow up, right? And it's his daughter. And I think that fathers, mothers, et cetera, are empowering women to be in the workforce, right? Like before, it's like, a lot of women didn't even work, right? And so I think that, and then if you did, maybe you were a teacher or whatever. So I think it's really just education at younger ages, right? Even starting in high school and before, of what various career opportunities look like and what is exciting for people.
I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said that, a lot of women, when they look for mentors and like whose path they want to follow, they look towards other women. And women, I had a friend who told me, you want to get more women into sales, you need more women in sales leadership positions, because successful women in sales leadership positions will attract other women into the field, and they will then mentor them and develop the next generation of female sales leaders, right? So I think that's a huge part of it. Another thing that I see is, I'm not sure that women, at least on LinkedIn, have historically been as comfortable sort of self-promoting. I think a lot of men, and in particular men in sales, who are, often quite vocal and confident and whatnot, like, you have no problem getting online and, bragging about their accomplishments and espousing advice all over the place. And, it seems like that trend is changing a little bit now, finally. But I think over the last 5 years or so, I think women have been a little slower to, really try to brand themselves as an expert and declare themselves an expert. So hopefully that stuff, changes. Is one of the reasons that we wanted to get, you on the show, as somebody who's been in sales, been super successful at sales, built your own business, been super successful at building your own business, right? So hopefully, we can kind of keep pushing the envelope and get some change going.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, right? And it's funny because people say that to me all the time. You should put more on LinkedIn, and like, I know I should, but I just it's not. But there's a lot happening at that.
Well, you guys are so big now. You should just be like Gary Vee, and you should have a team of 40 who just puts content out for you all day long, Carolyn.
Well, yeah. Why isn't Coca doing
on it?
I'm calling out Coca.
Coca should be doing all that.
Yeah. What advice do you have for people? And I've got a piece of advice, but I want to hear it from you. Is that you get that inevitable, that unfortunate call from your recruiter saying, hey, they decided to go in a different direction, right? Because it happens a lot, and there's rejection in sales. We all know it. What advice do you give to people to prepare to hear for it, or when that happens? Like, is there some coaching you can give to them as they're working with the recruiter about how to handle this better, or just as a human, how to handle it better?
So our business is all about building long-term relationships, right? And the transactional mindset in this line of work just doesn't work, right? And I think that is, back to the point about the myths out there, right? That the recruiters are just in it to like shove you into the job, and that's all they care about. And it's absolutely not true, right? We've worked with over 10,000 people to introduce them to job opportunities, thousands of companies. I think last I checked, it was like close to 3,000 companies, and that doesn't happen if you have a mindset of somebody takes another job and and obviously for me, it's a much higher level, bigger picture type thing. But for the recruiters as well, the relationships that you build at Betts, internally, externally, with your talent that you're representing and with your clients are, a foundation that you will build upon for the rest of your career. So having a transactional mindset, so it's kind of the bigger picture, right? And if you have a full pipeline and you're doing all the things that that you should do, and you're working with lots of candidates and they're very strong people, losing that one deal isn't a big deal. But it's when you're like, this Hail Mary situation falls through, it really is more of a lack of building the right pipeline and having a good pool of talent that you're working with than this one-off situation.
What about the candidate? What advice can you give to the candidate who's getting that call? Carolyn's calling me to say, hey, Richard,
Oh, sorry. Okay.
You love me, we have a good relationship. They decide to go in a different direction, right?
Yeah. Well, the good news is we generally have lots of other opportunities that we can get them to. So there's always kind of but hey, I know you said you weren't as excited about this other company we talked about, but, I know Scott or Richard or whoever, the hiring authority is, and I really think that you should meet that person, right? So there's an easy way to, push them forward and have additional opportunities, and if anything, it's an opportunity to have them and sometimes they just picked another candidate, and it happens. These people are in sales as well, so I feel like they should things, if rejection isn't something that you can handle in sales, you should probably choose a different career path, not to be flippant, but
yeah.
When you and your team are talking to candidates who are interviewing for like their first role where they're trying to level up, like let's say somebody's first director role or first VP of sales role or first CRO role, what kind of advice do you give candidate that you feel like is strong on paper and you believe in their candidacy, right? But they're maybe struggling to land a role. Maybe how do you guys help them tell their story? I'm thinking about a couple people that I know who are in this exact position who can't quite seem to land that next level up role, even though I feel and they feel like they're ready for it.
Well, and the easiest way to do that is internally, right? You've proven yourself. People see how hard you're working. You have, you work with mentors or whatever it is. You already are doing the next level job. So when that job opens, you're the first person. Now, in some companies, they're not growing as fast anymore, or, there's other people ahead of you for those opportunities, and you might have to leave that company to find what's next. And
I'm thinking about those kind of scenarios.
Yeah. But I wanted to make that point, right? Because I think a lot of people, or even if you want to we have people that want to transition from, sales into marketing. It's like, okay, none of my clients are going to hire you for that. Like, my clients want me to find experienced marketing people, right? But if you at your current,
can you repeat that sentence again? Because I can't tell you how many salespeople are like, well, I really want to end up going into marketing. And then they're like, oh, I can't get a marketing job. Say that sentence again. I think she said, no, my clients are not going to hire you if you're in sales and you're looking for a marketing job.
It's true. They want people that have done the marketing job, right? And so the easiest way to do that, though, is internally, right? Like, find somebody in marketing, but this is not the point of this. So, so my recommendation is, mentors, right? Finding people from former companies that you've worked with that have made those moves, understanding how they made it happen. I can tell you most of the time we do have some clients that will hire AEs as SDR managers, because the SDR manager world out there is, everyone needs them, and there's just not a lot of them out there, and they don't really want to hop around. So there are some, that's one kind of way up that I see from sales into leadership. And then the sales path, doing the SDR to AE to enterprise is a little bit easier than the leadership jump.
What kind of advice do you give? And I think we know it, but I'd love to just hear from your perspective. Maybe you are that young, that person who just graduated, right? It's January. Someone may be listening to this in June. They just graduated, and they want to get into sales. And maybe they haven't had it, maybe they didn't go work at, I worked at the Gap. I at least had some sales experience when I first started.
I worked at the Gap too.
Did you? Oh, did you?
Okay, you too. I never had a retail job.
Retail is also known as consistent inbound sales. But what kind of things can they talk about to promote themselves as, hey, I've got the right personality? Because sometimes it just comes down to personality that early in their career.
Okay, so your Gap example is fine, but like, I remember, it's going above and beyond, right? Like the Gap, if you had the number one, they just want to sign up everyone for Gap credit cards when I worked there, and you got $1 per one. And so I was just like trying to get every single person to sign up for the credit card. So you want to tell that story, right? Or what other things that you've sold. And TK, who was the founder of CowDApp, sold to Marketo, and great guy. He used to always ask, and I ask this a lot on our interviews, and I train my team to, tell me about the first time you ever sold something. And it doesn't have to be as an SDR or whatever, right? It can be, magazines or whatever it is. But the more creative and the more you can talk about how you did it better than everybody, worked harder, all of those things, that'll really give you a leg up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I've always taught people to say, talk about the first time you sold your parents on letting you go to Mexico for spring break in college, right? Like that's probably the biggest close.
I would never get hired because I was never allowed to go on those trips.
Yeah. What did your parents know about you, Carolyn? Like,
all her mom knew is that she was going to French class.
Right. You can't go to Mexico for spring break. You know French. We'll send you to Paris.
I did go to Paris though, so that was good. That's actually kind of better now that I think about it. But and then the other thing is like reading up on the industry, right? There's so many books and all the content that you guys are producing, and there's a lot of people that are doing this of being a student of what you want to get into and being able to speak to that when you meet with people as well.
Yep. Tell us a little bit more about what Betts has got going on. I know you guys have made a big addition. That's we certainly don't want to turn this into a pitch, but I think it's super valuable for people to understand. You've said a couple times services, right? People probably hear services from recruiters all the time, and I know you guys have done some stuff that's different. So please feel free to share with folks what that means.
So it's really exciting. So just not to get too, but a lot of times as companies get bigger, and most of our clients do, they're well-funded, they tend to move from using external partners like us to internal recruiters. And then a lot of times they'll, kind of on again, off again relationship. But they always said, you guys should build a platform. So what we did over the last 2+ years, so we just launched it in Q4, but this has been a project I've been working on for quite some time now, is that we developed a platform. So salespeople can go on, put up all their stats, everything they've done. It's called Betts Connect. So if you Google it, it's pretty clear on the website of what exactly it is. And then these companies, so we're basically selling into larger companies that have, fully baked internal recruiter teams that can then go in and access all of the active and passive talent pool that Betts is working with, which is, we've worked with over 200,000 people in the course of, Betts, and we have about 100,000 people in there with really rich data, and then they can go in and opt in to have these companies be able to access them with either active, passive, or we're starting this new setting called Make Me Move, where you're really happy, but hey, if a better opportunity comes along, it's a little more passive than passive, I guess. And that's it. So companies now pay a subscription to access our rich talent pool and all the data. And they, we do have a little bit of account management, but definitely not as much as our hardcore services business.
So are you saying, and I want to make sure I understood it. So if I'm a rep, right, and I'm like, hey, I just hit my 4-year cliff January 1st and I need to start looking or whatever, they could go and actually just upload their profile?
Yeah, well, they have to talk to somebody on our team. So we build out, in tandem, we build out their profile. We just, make sure everything seems legit. And then it goes live once they opt in to have their data be accessible. And it's only Betts clients that can view it. So it's not like your current employer will be able to see that you're doing that, and it blocks from there.
Got it. This is the beautiful part. I don't know if you heard that, but my garage door opened because I'm working in the garage as we're doing it.
Well, as we wind down the show here, Carolyn, we like to do something at the very end that's a little bit different. We like to kind of turn it around and say, how can we help you? Is there any questions or things that you want to ask us, or things that we might be able to do to help you in your business and your team?
Gosh, nothing's really coming. You guys have just been so awesome. Like, it was super. I love the fact that you guys reached out to do the training in our Austin office. We're always happy to have anybody like you guys use any of our offices to do that type of stuff. And thank you for including my team. That meant a lot to me. And the obvious thing is that, people are wanting to see what's next, or if you hear about them wanting to build their go-to-market teams, please send them our way. And
Will do.
Yep.
And how about you guys? What else can I do to help you?
I think this is good. I'd love to. I haven't even run this by Scott, but I'd love to talk to a couple of your people on your recruiting team. Like, let them understand what it's like to be a sales rep at a recruiting office, because I think it's very different than a traditional SaaS sale, right? Like, they've got two customers, they've got the candidate, they've got the company. I think it'd be fun to talk to some of them. Obviously, I think there's another value to that as maybe even we bring in two people, right? Bring in two people and interview both of them, just as something different on our podcast. So if you'd be open to that, I think that'd be kind of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, they would love
Yeah.
that. And just go ahead.
As for me, Carolyn, I'm just waiting for my referral check for the Qualia deal that you.
I was wondering when that was coming.
Since I built them to such a size and scale and the amount of funding that they got to that they could afford you. That's what you can do for me.
Awesome. Carolyn, how can people get in touch with you?
Just Carolyn at bettsrecruiting.com is my email. That's probably the easiest way.
Great.
And LinkedIn.
Yeah, of course. We're always there, right? So, Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it. It's been super fun and valuable, and appreciate all the insights. It's been really great. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I always enjoy talking to you. And if you're in Austin next week, I'm going to reach out to you.
Yeah, I'll shoot you a text.
All right. Thanks, Carolyn.